Hey there, folks. Welcome to Broadband Deployment News. The NTIA's recent guidance on alternative broadband technologies has prompted a telephone association and a cable association to get together for a joint press release and joint comments to that guidance. Be right back with more. Hey there, Rick Usey with Zcorum with Broadband Deployment News. So found this interesting. As they say, strange bedfellows here. You see NTCA and ACA Connects urge NTIA to prioritize most reliable high-speed internet technologies in BEAD. So NTCA is traditionally a association for smaller independent telephone companies, the cooperatives, if I recall. And then ACA Connects has traditionally been for cable operators. So it's changed as we've had kind of convergence of technologies and things are more broadband centric now, but still, I mean, that's who these associations serve. So they tend to have been in the past kind of competitors, and they've still got members that are going to be competing with each other in these various areas. As again, they've got, let's say, primarily telephone companies in an area, in areas, and then you've got primarily cable companies with the ACA. So, but they got together here because they see a threat as far as in their territories with the alternative broadband technology guidance that the NTIA has put forward with fixed wireless, but really specifically, I think the LEO or low Earth orbit satellites that the NTIA covered in that guidance. And I did a stream on that last week, I believe it was. So I went ahead and linked to that in the description of this video if you want to check that out. And then also I linked to this this press release as well as to the comments that I'm going to be showing here in a minute. And the comments are also linked in this press release. So let's look through this real quick, and then I really wanted to get to the actual response that they have. So you see here again, NTIA, NACA Connects, and again, now they both have added. They used to just go by the National Telephone Cooperative Association. Yes, it was co-ops. That's right. And American Cable Association, not with their names, but again, with the convergence, like all of these associations are kind of rebranding themselves. So now you see it's just NTCA. They don't really have a reference what that means, if I remember, as far as the acronym goes on their sites. But then you've got the Rural Broadband Association, so they have that tag in their name. And then you've got ACA Connects. They added the Connects to their name, and American Communications Association. So not just cable anymore. So you can see the difference there. Those two associations submitted comments yesterday, and there's a link there to the comments. We'll be looking at that here in a minute. Yesterday to the NTIA regarding the agency's proposed guidance on the use of alternative broadband technologies and deployment projects funded by BEAD, the Broadband Equity Access Deployment Program. To meet the goal of providing unserved locations with reliable high-speed internet, NTCA and ACA Connects asserted that NTIA's alternative technology guidance should neither be seen nor taken as an excuse to water down the strong priority for scalable networks established by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the BEAD Notice of Funding Opportunity, which recognize that fiber can deliver speeds necessary to meet the evolving connectivity needs of households and businesses over many decades. And this also highlights that cable companies are not anti-fiber. Cable companies are very pro-fiber. They don't want somebody coming into their territory and overbuilding them with fiber if they've got HFC or hybrid fiber coax cable technology in their service area. And if they see somebody coming in, they are going to overbuild themselves if they need to. For right now, cable companies are going to make the most use out of the HFC network that they have, and they can actually get high speeds and pretty good reliability with certain technologies, higher speeds through, let's say, DOCSIS 3.1 and DOCSIS 4.0 and DOCSIS 3.1 extended, and they've got proactive network maintenance and profile management applications that can maintain their DOCSIS 3.1 network, the capacity, and increase the capacity right away on that, and proactive, again, P&M, helping them to improve reliability on the network. And check out our website, zcorum.com, if you want to know about either of those technologies, and we have solutions there, so check that out. So cable companies are doing what they can to improve their HFC network as long as they can, because they've got good technology. It's fairly stable. They will tell you probably, if not in public, they'll tell you privately that, yeah, fiber is better. We know fiber is better. They're eventually going to get to fiber. If they go to greenfield locations, they're going to be deploying fiber. So in a situation here, with BEAD, if they're going to go into an area and build, if they're going to get a BEAD grant, they're not going to go in there and put in HFC or cable technology. They're going to go in there and they're going to deploy fiber to the home, fiber to the business, whatever. So you see here again, cable is not anti-fiber. They just want to protect their service areas where they have HFC or cable plant as long as they can, because it would be expensive. It's expensive to go build fiber in a location, but it's going to be expensive to overbuild themselves with fiber in a location as well. So not really a it's not really a fiber versus DOCSIS argument here. So they're saying, yeah, we all agree fiber is the highest priority, or should be the priority of broadband projects. Says rather, states and territories should only use alternative technologies to reach eligible locations where no provider is willing to deploy fiber or other reliable technologies on a reasonable basis, as measured over the economic life of the network. And a lot of what they say in here are things that the NTIA agrees with. This is what the NTIA is trying to do. They're trying to thread a difficult needle there, where you've got very high, got some locations just very, very expensive, very high cost, and to put fiber or really any wired technology in those areas would be so expensive that it could break the budget of the states. They're trying to give the states the leeway to be able to make decisions on, okay, you want to get fiber should be the priority broadband projects that you deploy, but you want to have a methodology and some technology for getting broadband to the last few locations that need it without breaking the budget. So if that means an alternative technology, then do that. And the alternative technologies that were approved were fixed wireless, unlicensed, and satellite broadband, but it wasn't really clear. There wasn't a lot of guidance. So they came out with guidance on that, on how to do that. So those technologies are only supposed to be used in areas, well, first of all, they've got to be areas that are unserved or underserved. So if you've already got a cable operator there, you've already got a fiber operator there, you've already got a licensed fixed wireless operator there, then you're not supposed to be able to get funding for those areas. But that's one thing, is that it needs to be unserved. And I forget what the second thing was. I just had something in my mind. I forgot what it was. But in any event, so you see here, they've got a couple of points that in here I actually want to cover as I look at the actual comments that they made. So this is the joint comments between them. And I'm not going to read through all this, but there was a few things that I wanted to highlight. So you see here, where non-reliable technologies are supported, eligible entities, and that would be states. Whenever you hear eligible entity, that's a state or a territory if it's outside the U.S. Where non-reliable technologies are supported, states should first fund those that bring fiber closest to eligible locations, and then, only as a last resort, turn to providers using low Earth orbiting satellite systems. So you see a lot of the focus is on LEO satellites right here. And again, that's something that I think the NTIA would agree with, that the states should try to fund all locations with fiber if possible. And as a last resort is when they need to look at these alternative technologies. Otherwise, BEAD runs the risk of repeating the failures of past broadband funding programs that aim to deliver incrementally better service to as many locations as possible, only to find several years later that better infrastructure was needed after all to keep pace with the demands of American consumers and businesses. And this is something, it's easy to say that, but it's also, you have to look at the reality of the situation back then. So fiber was available back then, but it was so expensive, and the technology, while it was proven, it was, because it was new, it was very expensive, and gains have been made over time. And this, it's not like back then we had 25 gig speeds. We had the potential to get up to a gig. So things have changed in this area, especially as far as the costs go. Let's say in deploying fiber versus other technologies. So back then we had DSL, and we had cable technology, we had fixed wireless technology. So, and the other thing was that the broadband speeds, we didn't need the kind of speeds that we need today. It would have been nice to have had that all at once, to say, okay, we're going to go ahead and do a gig everywhere. But if we had done that, we never would have gotten areas covered. So the FCC, and whoever it was at the time, was dealing, these different programs, was dealing with the fact that we had people that didn't have any kind of broadband. They had dial-up, basically. So we needed to get them off of dial-up and onto something that was reasonable. And at the time, let's say 10 meg by 1 meg was good. People who had that were like, hey, this is great. But today it's awful. So that's just how things have changed. So now we're at a point where fiber is reasonable, almost everywhere. And again, the only issue is generally it's whatever. If you can get something in the ground, fiber is reasonable. If the problem is the distance or the topography, those kinds of things, and wired is difficult, then wired is difficult, period. It's not a fiber thing anymore. So with fiber, now, we have much less chance of putting something like fiber out there that's going to be obsolete in a few years, because we know that we can get up to 25, 50, 100 meg symmetrical, possibly over the same fiber in years to come by changing out a little bit of the technology. So, and in some cases, very little of the technology. With Nokia equipment, for example, you can go 25 and I think even 50, up to 50 with the same equipment, with swapping out some cards in that equipment. So very different now than it was back then, when we were, there was always going to be this limited life. We just didn't know quickly. I think we didn't know how quickly the need for these higher speeds would happen. Maybe some people did, right? Some people maybe realized that, but others were like, oh, this should be fine. It's like, oh yeah, 640K for a PC, whatever it was fine. We'll never need anything bigger than that. Well, that changed pretty quickly. IP addresses. Oh yeah, got plenty of IP addresses. We'll never need more. And we found out we needed a lot more, and we're still dealing with that problem, right? So again, here when it comes to the use of LEO systems within BEAD, many questions remain. We are concerned that the NTIA's proposed mechanism for using LEO systems, reserving capacity, would be unworkable and would fail to meet the public interest objectives of the BEAD program. So again, talking about these low Earth orbit satellites, so those satellites are already up there orbiting. So the thought was from the NTIA that they would have the satellite provider, and right now you can just pretty much think Starlink, right? Because they're the only ones that have got the satellites up. Amazon with Project Kuiper may be able to do some BEAD bidding at some point. They may start getting satellites up next year. But be thinking about Starlink. So what they're saying is that these satellites are overhead, so maybe they can guarantee some capacity in areas where you've got these high-cost areas. But these satellites are going over all the time, so they're constantly orbiting the Earth. Now they're in constellations, so as they're orbiting the Earth, one satellite leaves an area, and as that satellite is leaving an area, another one is coming, or more than one is coming over, and so the terminals, the base stations that the end users, subscribers would use, are just following that. They follow the one satellite, and as the next one comes over, they switch to that, and you get this uninterrupted service as these constellations pass overhead. Well, how do you do that? How do you ensure capacity over a particular area? Because you can't. It's not like they can hover. They don't hover over that area. So if you've got a particular line, I guess, of satellites that could cross over an area or certain areas, maybe you somehow do that. But it really, I don't know how they're going to do that. I think that's the question here: is how do they make that happen? They say here a preferable alternative would be for the NTIA to negotiate a master agreement with an LEO provider that an eligible entity would then use, and that would enable consumers at eligible locations to purchase terminal equipment on a supported basis, using BEAD funds with a provider match. So again, the provider would have to match some of that, and on an unsupported basis, broadband service with 10-year performance assurances at reasonable rates, terms, and conditions. And it's interesting here, again, Starlink is the one satellite operator now that would qualify. So if Amazon does qualify, then maybe there would be two master agreements, one with Starlink and one with Amazon, and would they have to be the same? Would the NTIA say, well, you both have to have the same pricing and we'll let the consumer choose, that kind of thing? I don't know. All open questions there. It says, that said, given the many complex questions that remain unanswered, we believe the most thoughtful course would instead be for NTIA to issue a separate follow-on notice seeking more focused comment on how subsidizing shared connectivity on LEO systems could work as a practical matter and fit within a statutory construct intended by its terms to promote infrastructure investment. Scroll to somewhere else here. NTIA rightly chose end-to-end fiber as the priority broadband technology because it can deliver speeds to end-user premises that not only consistently meet but far exceed the baseline of 100 by 20, which is necessary to meet the changing end-user requirements. So again, we think right now, well, yeah, gig is plenty. Gig up and down is plenty for just about everybody, but it might not be in a few years. So again, fiber can take us a lot further. Unlike alternative technologies, speeds delivered over end-to-end fiber are unaffected by issues such as the number of customers using the service simultaneously or an end user's distance from an antenna. Well, it is actually affected by the number of customers using the service, not necessarily of that piece of fiber, because that fiber is a point-to-point kind of connection that you've got going from the subscriber back to the head end or the central office. But you've also got connectivity going from that central office or head end back out to the internet, and you've got the provider's network. So the more subscribers you get, you've actually got to increase those resources as well. So it's not like cable. Cable is a shared medium. Let's say you've got cable running through a neighborhood. That's kind of a shared medium, more of in a loop that everybody's kind of sharing that same cable. And then you've got, they're talking about wireless technologies here. Everybody's got just a single, let's say, wireless beam going to their home, but then you're sharing all of that. Well, it's not point-to-point thinking about it. No, it's not the case. Okay, so wireless is sharing that spectrum. The same thing with satellite. Everybody's sharing that satellite, even though they've got their antenna or their base station connecting to that satellite. It is a shared medium. So that's what they're talking about there. But you've still got the kind of on the backside, the backbone connection and those kinds of things that you've got with fiber that still are shared among everybody. Let's see here. In contrast, the speeds delivered to customer locations by non-fiber technologies such as fixed wireless can vary depending on weather and on other environmental conditions, resource capacity limitations, foliage, topography, distance of transmission lines, and other location-specific conditions. And it's true, satellite and fixed wireless are going to have those limitations, which is why we want those to be as a kind of a last resort. And this is an interesting comment, which I would agree with. It is not a technological bias to create a preference for a proven, more capable and widely deployed and adopted transmission method. So that's true. A lot of people will argue, hey, there's a technological bias in the notice of funding opportunity. Well, it's not really it's a bias for a good reason. And that is because it's proven, more capable, and it's widely deployed and adopted. And if it's a better technology, then you want to have the bias there. But again, it's a fine line they're trying to have here. You've got to have that alternative technology for those areas where you would break the budget if you try to deploy fiber. Too often in the past, as federal broadband programs have moved from concept to implementation, there's been a tendency to support broadband infrastructure that is just good enough to offer an improvement over what is available today, but that will not satisfy consumer demands now or in the future. And again, going back to my previous comment, that that's kind of Monday morning quarterbacking. Yeah, you look back in time and you say, well, this could have been done better. Well, yeah, at the time we thought we were doing the right thing because who knew we were going to need the speeds this quickly, and who knew how long it was going to take for fiber to be reliable, deployed, inexpensive, those kinds of things, because it was less so back then. And I think I got one or two more. I'll let you read through this, see if there's anything else in here I was going to comment on. Yeah, think back here. Here we go. So here's where they're going specifically into the low Earth orbit satellites and the reserved capacity question. So NTIA's reserved capacity proposal for supported service from low Earth orbit satellites is flawed. Accordingly, NTIA should seek further comment on the issue. If NTIA does not, it should not adopt the proposed guidance. Rather, NTIA should negotiate directly with the LEO provider to obtain a master agreement that would enable a state to use BEAD funds with a match from the LEO provider to subsidize the purchase of terminal equipment by consumers at eligible locations, and that would permit these consumers to purchase services at rates, terms, and conditions with a 10-year performance guarantee set in the agreement. So this is a little more detail on what I mentioned earlier. So again, the cost of the base stations is expensive compared to, let's say, if you go to a fiber operator or a cable operator, a lot of times they'll throw in the CPE, they'll just bring it out there, or they might, if it's got Wi-Fi capabilities, they might charge you $10 a month or something like that. But it's not like this base station satellites, which could be, I think it's $300, I believe, is what the current going rate is for that. The primary aim of the BEAD program is to support last mile broadband deployment to eligible locations, while implementing this objective for providers using terrestrial fixed technologies is relatively straightforward. It is anything but that for LEO providers. In the light of the unique characteristics of LEOs, NTIA proposes a novel construct for this technology alone. Use BEAD funds for the reservation of network capacity to meet the network capacity requirement. That's what I was talking about, how do you do that? In other words, the states would not procure last mile capabilities from providers using satellite technology by supporting the deployment of infrastructure. Rather, they would procure a reservation of satellite network capacity over a 10-year term and pay only for the amount of capacity used. So again, that's what the NTIA has proposed. They say, while we agree that satellites require a unique approach, we believe NTIA's proposed approach is unworkable for multiple reasons. First, negotiating and enforcing an agreement to reserve satellite capacity to serve eligible locations would be enormously complex. Customers have long reserved capacity on geostationary satellites, and those would be the satellites that people used to get internet through and that you would get something like DirecTV through or Dish Network. The satellite that's orbiting in a geostationary orbit 20, 30,000 miles above the surface of the Earth, as opposed to these low Earth orbit satellites that are 300-400 miles above the Earth that are constantly moving. So the geostationary ones don't move. So you can reserve capacity on that more easily because it's one satellite and you carve out a piece of capacity as opposed to an entire constellation of satellites. So that's their point there. As discussed above, LEO systems share capacity dynamically as each of the thousands of satellites orbits the Earth approximately every 90 minutes. In theory, one could develop a mathematical framework to ensure service over certain areas, but the eligible locations receiving LEO service would almost certainly be scattered geographically, not in neat project areas as the notice suggests. Further, as discussed below, any funds an eligible entity or the state spends on LEO capacity can almost certainly be used to serve non-eligible locations, including in other states and even in other countries. So it's a good point. If you've got a service area that's maybe, let's say it's a mountain with 3 homes on it that are unserved, and it would cost a fortune to get fiber service to all of them, well, then you can do the low Earth orbit satellite as long as they have a shot to the sky, to the satellite. But then how do you reserve capacity for those 3 homes in a constellation of satellites that are moving across the Earth every 90 minutes? I mean, again, even if you try to reserve it on the satellites that are just crossing that one area, then everybody else in the world that those satellites are crossing, when they cross over them, have access to that capacity as well. So yeah, I don't know how you do that. Second, to the best of our knowledge, no entity has reserved LEO capacity under the type of construct that NTIA envisions at a minimum. This would be a novel procurement for NTIA or any state, and given the shared nature of LEO service, it's questionable whether any state would have the ability to negotiate and enforce or audit a reservation of and payment for such capacity for the many locations that may need to be served. So it'd be difficult for the states to do this, difficult for them to audit that they're actually reserving that capacity. Third, it's difficult to see how a procurement of capacity would mesh with the many requirements in the NOFO, or Notice of Funding Opportunity, which among other things requires the provider to match government support, the government to have a security interest in the reserved capacity, and the provider to certify the equipment is compliant with the Build America, Buy America statute. Fourth, yeah, I don't know, satellites up there, they're already there. See, that's the other thing is the satellites, the constellation's already there. It's just a question of, how many more they launch, both for capacity needs for this, as well as for capacity needs for customers around the world, as well as to replace the satellites that are up there that are supposed to be replaced every 5 years or so. Fourth, given the global reach of an LEO system, it would be inefficient and impractical to have each state negotiate its own service agreement with an LEO provider. In sum, the risk that states, both individually and in aggregate, would overpay for LEO satellite capacity or not obtain what is expected is substantial, resulting in the provider making excessive profits and or subsidizing service to non-eligible locations or even in non-US geographies. Yeah, because again, if you're increasing capacity to hit a certain area here, those same satellites with increased capacity are going to be going around the world and coming back again. So the notice provides no answers to these difficult questions. In fact, the many questions it asks is telling. The reserve capacity proposal needs to be fleshed out much further. We thus urge NTIA to step back, recraft its proposal, and seek additional comment. There's time to assess these questions and get them right, as states only need to reach the question of whether and to what degree alternate technologies may be useful to fill gaps where no applications have been received leveraging reliable technologies. And the point there is that it's going to be a while before states have to consider what alternative technologies they're going to use, because they first, I think probably every state's going to, I don't know if this is true, but it would make sense for every state, I know a lot of them are, to look at, to get bids for all of the areas that they can to find out what locations, what unserved locations providers want to serve, get those bids in, and then in a second round or somehow in a second process, then determine which areas they don't have any coverage. Nobody has stepped up to do it, or they have, maybe it's too expensive. They've got an extremely high cost threshold that then they're going to set. And that all needs to take place, and that's going to be further down the road here. So they've got time, the NTIA has time to try to figure this out. Should NTIA believe it needs to adopt guidance immediately, we propose it adopt a framework to provide connectivity using low Earth orbit satellites that is more straightforward, easier to implement, audit, and consistent with the notice of funding opportunity, and that will facilitate service to the very hardest to serve locations. First, NTIA and not the states would negotiate a master agreement with the LEO provider for the acquisition of terminal equipment by consumers at eligible locations where an LEO provider will win support. So if they win support in an area, then this would be a special deal based on that. The states would then use BEAD funds to subsidize the procurement of this equipment, which the LEO provider would then provide or sell at a discount if the equipment cost is not fully subsidized. So for example, maybe there's a $200 subsidy, but the equipment costs $300, and the person living in that unserved area could get it for $100. The NOFO requirements would apply to such a procurement. Second, as part of the master agreement, NTIA would negotiate a bulk service agreement, which would include monthly service prices, terms and conditions, and importantly, a service level agreement to guarantee performance over the 10-year period. However, as with other program awards, consumers at eligible locations would pay for the service. So I think here it would be kind of, I think what they're saying is kind of like the Affordable Broadband, Affordable Connectivity Program, the ACP, where if you were, let's say, in a low income situation, then you could get a $30 subsidy towards your internet. Well, here, this would be kind of like that, except if you're in one of these unserved high cost areas that it's agreed that this alternative technology can be used for a state, then you would have a subsidy available to you. And it could be, again, if Starlink is $120 per month, which is what it is right now, maybe you get a subsidy of $50 a month or something like that, something to bring it closer to what it would cost for you to buy the service if you didn't live at the top of a mountain with neighbors 2 miles away, kind of thing. I think that's what they're saying there. There's a conclusion here. So there you go. Again, I linked to this if you want to check it out. I do find it interesting that you've got both the NTCA and ACA Connects, kind of getting together here on their thoughts. And again, they compete in areas, but here it makes sense for them to get together and make their voices heard to the NTIA, so the NTIA takes a second look at what they're going to do with these satellites, because there are some interesting questions that they bring up. Again, it didn't make sense to me either how you could reserve the capacity. I understand providing subsidies for end users, but the reserve capacity, I think they mentioned in here maybe a service level agreement that says anybody getting these funds needs to be able to get certain speeds, and if they don't, then then maybe Starlink isn't paid the subsidy, that kind of thing. So the subsidy would go back to Starlink, and if they're not meeting the requirements as far as performance, then they don't get the subsidy. And I don't know what you do then. Do you pay it to the end user? I don't know. Again, lots of open questions, so they got to figure this out. It is a unique situation. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. If you're not subscribed to our channel, click the subscribe button, ring the bell, and you'll be notified when I'm live. If you like this video, if you give me a thumbs up, I'd like that. And we'll see you next time for Broadband Deployment News. Take care. Bye-bye.